ज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Hello to you all. Good to have you here. Please, anyone would like to take a seat, please feel free to sit down. Tonight, as we do every night here in the Rishikesh Kirtan Fest, we have questions and answers. And so my name is Kaustubha Das. I will be answering questions today, and I look forward to spending this time with you. Would anyone like to begin with a question? Yes.
Hello. Someone recently told me about the 4 different yogas over history. Could you go into them a little bit more for me? Thank you.
So you're speaking of 4 different paths of yoga? You mean different yuga dharmas? The different dharmas for each yuga? Or the different 4 different paths of yoga commonly spoken about? Okay. So it's not uncommon to speak of maybe of chapter 13, 25 and 26, or 26 and 27? 13th chapter. Commonly, there's a vast array of yogic paths and practices. It's really broad. There's so much and so many different ways to engage. It's an amazing field of study, and but it's not so uncommonly they're categorized into 4 different groups. It might be. A lot of people believe that it was recently categorized that way. When I say recently, I mean like in the last century and a half. But I do believe you find it in the Bhagavad Gita. And this is actually what we're speaking about in this morning's class. There's text in the 13th chapter where it's speaking about how one connects, how one discovers and engages with the Paramatma, with God within their own heart. And it says there are 4 different paths to this. I'll read those verses for you. The Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, texts 25 and 26. Verse 25. Some perceive the supersoul, the Paramatma. Some perceive the supersoul within themselves through meditation. The word here uses dhyana, and that means it's a meditative path. It's speaking of commonly what people call Ashtanga yoga. They call it dhyana yoga. May call it Raja Yoga, but it's a path where you seclude yourself and still the mind. You go very deep within. Others, through the cultivation of knowledge. And that path would commonly be called Jnana Yoga. Sometimes they call it Sankhya. But it's a very stoic path wherein one analyzes all their desires. Really examines them through the filter of Vedanta, through the filter of the teachings of the Upanishads especially. You analyze your desires, you see the flaw in them. You see that there's something in your mind convinced that this will satisfy, this will bring happiness, but then you analyze how perhaps it brings happiness, but ultimately it brings pain. And by analyzing it this way, one clarifies the way they relate to it, and they break those desires. So we could call this Jnana Yoga. So Ashtanga Yoga, Jnana Yoga. It continues, text 25. And still others through working without fruitive desires. That's called Karma Yoga. Right? Bhagavad Gita, so much teachings on this. But the idea here is that the first 2 paths, people generally walk away from the world. They walk away from their home. They walk away from their family. They walk away from their occupations and all of their social roles, because those relationships and those circumstances tend to draw us deeper into material consciousness, tend to reinforce our identity with temporary roles. So it can be beneficial to walk away from all of that if one wants to pursue this yoga path. But in karma yoga, the idea is it's a combination of two things. It's a combination of the karma side it's a combination of the engagement in one's social roles, embracing one's social roles, but combined with jnana, combined with the same knowledge that the jnana yogi has. Understanding I'm not my body, I'm not my mind. Understanding that none of these temporary roles that I'm playing or temporary identities that I have as man, woman, black, white, American, Indian, anything like that, none of those are really true. They're temporary phases that come and go quickly and then are gone. And then I'm still left. I'm still here and they're gone. So they aren't me, right? That's jnana. When you take that kind of jnana and you combine it with your duties in this world, with that knowledge you have detachment, and so now you're engaging in this world not as most people do. Most people engage in these roles because they think they're going to get something external to make them happy by performing these roles. But the karma yogi has the knowledge of the jnana yogi, but they're taking it into their roles in society. This is Krishna is highly recommending this path. He kind of includes bhakti in this umbrella of socially engaged, but doing it with wisdom, doing it with knowledge, doing it with attachment. So that's three, right? Ashtanga yoga, jnana yoga, karma yoga. And now he dedicates an entire verse to the fourth path. And in this, he doesn't exactly name the path, but he explains the practice. And that practice we could call shravana, which means hearing. And if you study the path of bhakti yoga, like perhaps the most important text on it is the Srimad Bhagavatam, 18,000 verses. And there's some verses there that speak of 9 limbs of the practice of bhakti yoga. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smarnam, Parasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanavedanam. It lists these 9. The first one is Shravana, hearing. Especially one hears, they hear the wisdom of the tradition through these sacred texts, and especially for the Bhakti Yogi, they're hearing the Leelas, they're hearing the pastimes of Krishna. Right? So that's Shravana, the first limb of Bhakti. And sometimes you refer in yogic circles, by naming the first, it's implied everything that follows. So by saying through Shravana, it could be interpreted as it's referring to all the practices of Bhakti Yoga. But in any case, he's going to speak about it, and I'm going to listen to it carefully, and then I'm going to address something that we find in this verse, okay? Because again, he treated this a little different. Rather than naming it, he spoke about the practice, but he shares something more about it too. So he says, again, there are those who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, they may not have quite the learning of the Jnana Yogi. But they begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about him from others. Because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death. So they achieve the goal of yoga. Now notice that not only did it speak about the practice, but it also spoke about the qualification. It said this person may not. It didn't say that they didn't have the knowledge, but it said they may not. So there's an indication here that the qualification to practice this path, it's at a lower bar. It's not saying that the result is a lower bar, because it said they also achieve freedom from birth and death. But it's saying that the qualification to practice it is a lower bar, that almost anyone can do it. Anyone could do it. And this is something unique about Bhakti Yoga, that we can see. Can you take a very young person, a child, let's say, 5-year-old, 3-year-old, and can you speak jnana to them? Will it make sense to them? Will they be able to really understand it? Can they say with that, can they walk away from home? Can they live in a cave and feel satisfied within? I don't want to say it's absolutely impossible, but I'm going to say that would be a very rare individual. Okay, very rare. Can they practice Ashtanga yoga? Can they live by all the ethical codes? Can they practice seriously asana? Can they practice pranayama? Can they practice withdrawing the senses and focus concentration for hours and hours and hours at a time, sitting very still, going within? A child can't do this. But can a child go into that kirtan? Right? You see? A child, there's one, in 1966, Srila Prabhupada, the great soul, who brought bhakti kind of heroically. When he was 22 years old, he received, you could say he received an order. He was requested by his guru. The moment that he met him, he said, "You please take these teachings of bhakti to the whole world. Take them to the English-speaking language, take them to the Western world." And he dedicated his life to it, but it took him years and years. He received that order when he was 22. He left and arrived in America when he was 70 years old. Okay, so a long time. He arrived as a 70-year-old man. He had 2 heart attacks on the boat coming over. He had no money with him. I think he had something like 7 rupees or 70 rupees or something like that. And at that time, not a lot you could do with that in New York City. He had a crate of his books that he could sell, but it wasn't that much. He was really dependent on the grace of his guru and the grace of God to somehow support him as he took up this courageous mission. I'm trying to remember why it's just... Sometimes I get lost. I start thinking, I go all over the place. Can anyone remind me why I brought him up? Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you. So, in 1966, he was living in downtown New York, and he had a few followers that had caught on to this message of bhakti. They were kind of like beatniks. And one of them arranged for him to do a recording of Kirtan somewhere in Times Square, like in the center of New York City. And he did a very nice, simple Kirtan, very powerful, very deep chanting. You can feel it. But he also spoke about this mantra. And you hear him explain what the chanting is. This chanting is not an artificial imposition on the mind. It's actually speaks, it goes right to the very soul. It's the nature of the very self. And he says, he describes the path, he describes the ease of the path, and he says, even a child can take part, even a dog can take part. Like that. And we have seen this. You can see that sometimes the animal, we were talking about animals the other night. We can see that. But the point I'm making is that 4 paths of yoga are being described. But it's saying there's an ease to the path of bhakti. Even if you don't have the qualifications to practice the other one, you can practice. But it also gives the full results. So that's bhakti yoga. So these 4 paths are there. Now, if we take all 4, we could say they fall into 2 categories. 2 of the paths, karma yoga and jnana yoga, to achieve the goal of them, to take them the whole way to where they're meant to deliver. Like, for instance, Ashtanga yoga is meant to deliver you to the platform called Kaivalya, where you totally transcend the modes of material nature. All external material influences, you're above and beyond them. And to get there, you have to enter into a state of samadhi, a state of trance. And you have to practice entering into that state. And then you have to dwell in that state. And if you can dwell in that state effectively for a long enough time, all of the latent impressions, all of the programming deep within the mind can, let's say, disintegrate, or if not disintegrate, it can be seen for what it is, and become ineffective in pulling you into illusion. It's a very, very challenging path. And to achieve it, we were saying this yesterday, or we're saying this morning. But if what you're trying to do is entirely still the mind and hold it on one object, enter deep into a state of trance, counteract or dissolve lifetimes of subtle impressions stored in the subconscious mind, so much so and so completely that you can rivet your entire awareness on the self alone. That's not the kind of thing you do at home with other people doing other things, with people next door watching television, and it's the kind of thing you remove yourself from the world and you seclude yourself from the world, and to practice that kind of thing. You can walk up these hills. You can walk up these hills and find people doing this in caves. There's to this day, there's people still doing it. But it's not the kind of thing you can do very easily. And that doesn't mean you can't take, for instance, let's say Ashtanga yoga. It doesn't mean you can't practice yama niyama. It doesn't mean that you can't embrace the ethical codes and the virtuous practices that are part of that path. It doesn't mean you can't practice asana. It doesn't mean you can't practice pranayama. But to go into samadhi and achieve that goal, that's the kind of thing you walk away from the world to achieve. Same with Jnana Yoga, the kind of stoic. It's really all about examining all one's desires and removing oneself from the realm where those desires are stirred up. So in both these paths, we can call them socially disengaged. It's socially disengaged. The other two paths, Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, we could call them socially engaged. Bhakti Yoga, there's always nuances. Karma Yoga by definition means you're socially engaged. Bhakti Yoga most commonly is practiced through social engagement, but theoretically one could go up to a cave out in the mountains and meditate on Krishna's name and meditate on Krishna's pastimes and achieve the goal of Bhakti Yoga. So here are four paths like that. When we read Bhagavad Gita, now there's a lot of books that come out of this Vedic tradition. There's the four Vedas, which are vast. And connected to the four Vedas are the Upanishads. There's 108 Upanishads. Then there's the Vedanta Sutra. Then there's the Mahabharata. Are you familiar to some degree, at least with the terms? Yeah. Now the Mahabharata, well, let's put it this way. The four Vedas were texts that were really geared towards priests, men that did rituals so that people could cultivate good karma. It's full of technique. It's full of precise mantra chanting. It's full of precise ritual instruction. There's a lot of emphasis on doing things exactly right, so that one will receive the results of one's ritual. And generally, the common people would never read these books. They would give a donation to a priest to perform the rituals that they learned through reading the Vedas. So it's kind of like a technical manual. It definitely has a lot of spiritual information, but it's not so accessible to the masses. Now the Upanishads go another direction, or they could say, let's say they evolve to another stage, where it's like, let's not bother doing all these rituals, let's throw them out. Let's not make our goal to achieve the material things of this world. Let's throw out that whole idea. Let's do the sacrifice that we do externally. Let's do something more subtle. Do a sacrifice internally. Let's go within and let's sacrifice our false identity. Let's throw that into the fire. Right? You understand? It's taking us in another direction. But again, the path to achieve that goal in the Upanishads is renunciation. It involves walking away from the Stoic analysis and renunciation of the world. Now, those are books that aren't, again, they're not going to appeal to the masses. Those books are going to appeal to the renunciates, to the sannyasis. And to philosophers. They're cryptic. I'll try to translate one verse so you get the idea. The famous verse: Om Purnam Adaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachite Purnasya Purnam Adhaya Purna Eva Vasishite. Purna means, who can say? Whole, complete, right? It's saying that this is whole, that is whole. If you take the whole away from the whole remains. It's like, okay, what are you talking about? You need another elevated philosopher to explain what this means. And there's a lot of debate over exactly what it means. That's the tradition of Vedanta, the tradition of the Upanishads. But again, the common person is not going to read this text. It's not going to appeal to them so much. It's too cryptic, too philosophical, too much geared towards walking away from the world. I'm a person with a family and with responsibilities, and I don't see how this relates to me. Maybe when I grow old and my responsibilities have decreased, maybe I can think of living that life and maybe even walking away from home, and maybe those teachings will become more important to me then. But for the average person, it's not very interesting even. Okay, now the sage Vyasa does something very interesting. He's written the Vedas, he's written the Upanishads. Now he says, I'm going to write a saga, an epic. And he composes a work that is massive. 100,000 verses. It's 10 times, if you took the Iliad and the Odyssey, the great epics, put them together, multiplied them by 10, it would still be smaller than the Mahabharata, this work. And it's beautiful. It's so fascinating. It's so captivating. The stories. In India, Indian people you've grown up with, raise your hand if you've grown up with Mahabharata. Any of you? Yes, that's right. You grow as a child, you grow up with it. But it's important to you at every stage of life, even at the very end. And it's this thing, it's all of the welcome. Hare Krishna. Here you go. Oh, very nice to see you. Now, suddenly I'm remembering exactly who you are. Very nice to see you again. What was I saying? Mahabharata. The stories are so fascinating. The characters, you fall in love with the characters, the intrigue, the drama. It's entirely captivating. Children find it absolutely, the story's just wonderful and fully engaging. But philosophers, they also find it fully engaging. And it's telling the story of these five brothers, and especially Arjuna, all of the struggles that they go through. The entire book is fascinating and valuable. We meet the yogis, but it's not so cryptic. It's easier to read, it's easier to understand, and it's far more interesting to the masses. But within it, when it builds up to its peak moment on the battlefield, where Arjuna finally has to carry out his vows and fight this incredibly challenging battle, he breaks down. And in his state of, what's the right word? Sometimes people say like panic attack, but in his confusion, in his moment of despair and confusion, he turns to Sri Krishna. And many important things happen in this text, Bhagavad Gita. Then the Bhagavad Gita is spoken. Arjuna's asking questions, Krishna's giving answers. In this 700 verses, you get the teachings of the Upanishads condensed. It's in such a fascinating way, in such a clear way, less cryptic, more just really easy to understand. So you get condensed teachings in an easy to understand way when your mind and heart are wide open to hear them. But it does more than that, because it takes a lot. There's teachings in the Upanishads that are kind of underground. They kind of peak up a little bit and then they go back underground, and peak up a little bit and go back underground, and they don't stand out. Specifically, I'm speaking about the teachings on devotion, on love. They're there. They're definitely there. But the emphasis is more on renunciation, on walking away from the world. In the Bhagavad Gita, it brings the love part right up to the top. So it has all the knowledge and all of the detachment. It speaks about this, but it begins to speak about it in a different context. That one let go, not just for the sake of finding peace of mind or moksha, freedom from the influences of this world, but that actually from that place, one can meditate on the Supreme Person and awaken divine love. And divine love becomes the message of the Gita. More so, far more explicitly than you find in the Upanishads. And so that happens, and another thing happens. Rather than saying walk away from the world, as the Upanishads emphasize, the Bhagavad Gita is saying take all that Upanishadic knowledge and apply it while working in the world. And it would be just as effective. And that idea makes this book far more practical, far more universal, far more applicable and approachable than the Upanishads ever were. Now I can become a yogi and I can begin practicing right now without walking away from all my responsibilities. And my place of work, which most people think of as a realm of materialism, with the right knowledge and detachment, that very same place can become the place of yoga for me, like that. So the Bhagavad Gita becomes super important. And the Bhagavad Gita, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna goes through all these different paths, all these different dharmas, and he explains them. And he keeps contrasting them with bhakti. Bhakti engaged in this world. So it's like bhakti under the broader umbrella of karma yoga. Bhakti performed in the world, because that's what he's asking Arjuna to do. He's saying that it's one state of consciousness that determines their destination. And so, and he's saying, so Arjuna, whatever you meditate on the time when you're leaving your body, you attain that state without fail. Tasmat, therefore, sarveshu kaleshu, all the time, including when you're at work, right? Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu, therefore all the time, mamanusmara, always think of me, always meditate on me, always think of me. Yujacha, and at the same time fight, right? So he's saying, do your duty, but do it in consciousness of me. Do it with the consciousness of a yogi. Do it with the knowledge, informed as a yogi is informed, detached as a yogi is detached. Externally, you might look like a materialist, but internally, something totally different is going on. So Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita, encourages Arjuna and all of us to engage in the world as a path of yoga, to do it well informed with knowledge, but also to do it with bhakti, to do it with devotion. And he very clearly identifies himself as the absolute truth that had been spoken about in the Upanishads and the Vedas. And he ties that in using the same language, making it very clear that he's not an ordinary being. He is the worthy and most excellent object of meditation. So when you read the Bhagavad Gita and see it as it is, it validates all these different paths, but it's the encouragement, and not even just encouragement. Practically, Krishna is begging Arjuna. He's not saying, I'm going to tell you what you have to do. You decide. But please consider this. Please consider, I'm sharing with you the most confidential knowledge about bhakti. Please consider it very carefully and then do what you want to do. But know that I'm sharing this confidential message with you because you're so dear to me. So it's the end of the Bhagavad Gita becomes, it's like a plea coming from Krishna. Please take up bhakti yoga. Please do it engaged in a practical way, engaged in the world. That'll be a very suitable practice for you to practice. So there's so much talk. In many ways, we could call the Bhagavad Gita a comparative study between all these different paths. So is there something more you would like to ask about these four paths? Is that good? Okay. Thank you very much. It's a nice question. Sir.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I really appreciate the words you shared. And I have this question, like, as all humanity trying to transcend the duality world, trying to live in the love, and is it really possible to transcend this duality into non-duality? Because love and hate, it's the same light and dark, and we're all trying to transcend. But is it really possible for humanity? And if yes, then what's the perfect example according to Bhagavad Gita in Kali Yuga? How one can transcend to this duality?
The material duality that you're speaking of is the realm of the three modes of material nature. Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. How they combine to take on different forms, how they function, and how they influence us. It's the movement of the three modes of material nature, moved by the force of time, that makes this world move and creates the influences that cover our understanding, our experience of our own nature. How is that transcended? Krishna will say in the 7th chapter, 7:14, Daivi Hyesha Gunamai Mama Maya Duratyaya. that these three modes of material nature, he says they're my energies, and they're duality. They're very difficult to overcome, very difficult to transcend this duality caused by these modes. But then he says, Mam eva ye prapadyante, mayam etang tarantate. But if one surrenders unto me, one can very easily cross beyond it. So he's saying that we can transcend material duality. But one thing that's important to understand is that the Gita's vision of reality is not, there's different ways that we can say something is opposite, right? If this is a world of bondage, then what is the world of freedom? You would expect it to be the opposite. But we have to be careful about how it's the opposite. What is the opposite of being $1 million in debt? There's two ways you can answer this. You could say you're free of debt. That's the opposite. You were in debt and now you're not in debt. Or you could say you have $1 million. That's the opposite. You understand? So one school of Vedanta is saying that the opposite of material bondage is no material bondage. The opposite of material duality is the absence of duality. Whereas another school of Vedanta, the Bhaktivedanta school, says the opposite of material duality is spiritual duality. In other words, a realm where there is still me and you existing of the same nature, but with our own individual consciousness. Right? That's the vision of the Bhagavad Gita, and that's shared at the beginning of many places, but at the beginning of the 15th chapter, there's an analogy for the world that we live in. And that is a banyan tree that is upside down. The roots are going up and the branches are going down. Where do we see a tree where the roots are going up and the branches are going down? In a reflection, right? And in a reflection is the opposite of what it's reflect. In other words, a reflection looks just like something, but it's exactly backwards or exactly upside down, depending on the angle that you view it from. And so Bhagavad Gita is saying that this world is a reflection. If it's a reflection, then there must be some source of the reflection. There must be some realm that's being reflected. And that realm must look a lot like this world, but it must be the opposite. And so the spiritual realm, through the Bhagavad Gita's presentation, it looks like this realm in the sense that there is still duality, there's still individuality, there's still form. But it's spiritual duality, spiritual individuality, spiritual form that is not subject to the flaws of material form, which fall under the influence of time and are subject to change and decay and ultimate destruction. So the spiritual realm has me and you and individual consciousness, but it has it in its perfected form. And the forms that are there are eternal forms, composed of spiritual energy. So material dualism is being transcended through the Bhagavad Gita's teachings of surrender to Krishna and achieving a state beyond, kind of transcending the illusion, the illusory realm, the reflected realm, the virtual reality, transcending it and entering into reality or entering into eternity, like this, through bhakti. Is that okay? Another question? Yes.
Thank you for answering. I feel like in spiritual realm, as you said, we can transcend this and experience non-duality when we surrender to it. And according to you said spirituality and material world are two different worlds. But by the time a human being is living on planet Earth, he is in his material body. How one can see it as separate? To experience spirituality, we need material world. And by the time we are in material world, we are in duality. So in human world, one has to experience duality. Even a monk I see who is meditating in the caves in Himalayas, is also experiencing the pain and suffering, the duality. Even he have renunciated the world, and he is still going of course, he is much more higher than the normal being in terms of consciousness level, practicing bhakti. But still, by the time a human is born, is can he actually transcend, or is just a paycheck which is after the death, which is never arrived, or it's just a concept, or it is a reality that one can transcend, or it's just a paycheck after death, a commitment or a fake commitment, which is by the time we are in human world, it's not helping us, and by the time we leave this human body, maybe one can transcend and experience this non-duality. So, as you said, I understand that bhakti is helping us to raise our consciousness, but still there is pain. Still, love can turn into hate. Even like just few days ago, I was seeing a video getting viral here, people getting fight about with the Krishna devotees here, why we are not allowed to enter, and that's also a very good cause people are doing here, chanting mantras, but some people don't understand and they are trying to fight, and still there is a conflict going on because of this hate and love. So how one can find a balance in this, in practicality? So I still wondering. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good question. And I wanted to, this is text 10, the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Here we're getting, again, what we were discussing earlier, a vision of bhakti being practiced in the world. So vision, that's called karma yoga, but it can be bhakti yoga performed in the world. So it's both bhakti yoga and karma yoga. And Krishna's trying to help Arjuna understand you're in a world of duality right now. You have to fight this battle. You're torn between doing it and not doing it. You're suffering all kinds of anxiety. You can transcend it, he's saying to him. He says, one who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful reaction, papam, or you could say by bad karma. And then he gives an example. He uses an analogy to help us understand it. And he says, Padma Patram Tva Ambasaha. As the Padma Patram. Padma means lotus. Patram, leaf. Padma Patram. Just like a lotus leaf. This speaks to what you're saying. The lotus leaf is in the water, but it's not, in a sense, it's untouched by the water. It's unaffected by the water. Other leaves, you'll put them in water and they'll become soggy and fall apart. But the lotus leaf has a waxy kind of texture that makes it kind of waterproof. So even though it's in the water, it's unaffected by the water. Krishna is saying in this verse, if you do your duties in life with detachment, that means knowledge, jnana, and vairagya, and then you turn it into upasana, you turn it into worship by offering it all to God, then you can be in this world but unaffected by it. You can be in the world of duality, but your consciousness above the duality, that can be achieved. And granted, it's a messy world, right? Granted, even if you have that consciousness, people aren't always going to understand you. People may come at you with hatred. People may come at you aggressively. You may have to tolerate that. But because your consciousness has risen above the dualities, you experience the dualities, but you don't experience them as a materialist does. Because they're being processed through your knowledge. You're being untouched because of your detachment. When you have detachment, when you have knowledge, detachment becomes automatic, like this. When you really understand something for what it is, you let go. And even though you're in the middle of it, and even though you're experiencing it, you're experiencing it and still untouched by it. This is to really understand. For instance, I knew a man who was a great bhakti yogi. He got cancer. He had his leg amputated. But then the cancer spread through his whole body. His body was covered with all kind of painful tumors. His body was becoming emaciated. He was to die very soon and be torn away from all that he knows in this world. And he was chanting Krishna's name with a huge smile on his face and tears of happiness pouring down from his eyes, and saying that life does not get any better than this. So he's definitely experiencing the dualities of this world. He's feeling it. But he's also feeling this, he's also situated beyond it. He's right in the middle of it, but he's unaffected by it. He's feeling happier than anybody else. He's saying life doesn't, when most people be saying life doesn't get any worse than this, he's saying life doesn't get any better than this. So through his surrender, through his bhakti, he rose above the duality. Even though his body was still in it, he was beyond it. And so that can be achieved. But this world is always a messy place. And at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna turns to Arjuna and says, have you heard my instructions? Are you still confused? Arjuna says, my confusion, my illusion is now dispelled by your words. I understand it. Everything you've taught me, I understand it. And now I'm prepared to carry out your order. So when he achieves this full understanding, when his understanding goes beyond illusion, it didn't say that he merged into a oneness beyond all external duality. Rather, what he said is, now I'm going to operate according to your vision. I'm surrendering to you. And then he enters into the battle. and we can read all about that in Mahabharata. So this is the idea. We can be in the world, but not of it. We can be like the lotus leaf is the metaphor for understanding that. Is that okay? Thank you very much. Very nice questions. One more thing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your answer. It's wonderful. And I can understand that was really helpful example, the lotus. And I still wondering, as we say, Krishna has created this entire Leela, this material world, the spiritual world. So it is also the creation of Krishna, the duality. So I would like to know why he have create this duality. Why? What's the reason for humanity to experience all those pains? If his goal is to attain people again back to him, why he have created this ignorance? He could have just create directly this connection and non-duality. So according to that, what was his goal or aim to bring us in this Leela? Thank you.
You used an interesting word, ignorance. If we slow it down, it's ignorance. Ignorance. The sages say that what ignorance is, or illusion is seeing anything disconnected from Krishna. And reality is seeing everything connected to Krishna. It's as simple as that. Now, why do we experience this world, and why would Krishna create it? It's due to ignorance. But the point is, we wish to ignore. Why do we wish to ignore? Because we want to taste something that reality does not facilitate. So I've used this analogy a few nights back, but I'll return to it. If a child, let's say a little boy, sees his grown father driving a car, then a desire arises in the child. What would that desire be? I also want to drive the car. But reality does not facilitate that desire. It can't accommodate it. He's not big enough. He doesn't have the motor skills. He's incapable of driving the car. It's an impossibility. So now here's an issue. There's a desire. Reality does not facilitate it. So therefore, one will have to ignore reality. Ignorance. Right? And one will have to, and if the desire cannot be fulfilled in reality, then where would it be fulfilled? In illusion, right? Or let's say, if not in reality, then in virtual reality. So the child needs a car, but a real car will not facilitate his desire, so he needs an illusory car, right? He needs an artificial car, a virtual car. let's say that that car is nothing more than a cardboard box, and the father draws some wheels on it, and maybe he gives them something that's like a steering wheel. And now the child is sitting in a cardboard box, but he's ignoring the reality that it's a cardboard box, and he's seeing it, perceiving it, experiencing it as if it's a car, right? If someone comes along and says, "This is ridiculous. This isn't a car. This is a cardboard box," the child doesn't want to hear that, right? It would actually be like a little insensitive and cruel to say such a thing. Well, you're speaking the truth. Yeah, but he wants to be in the illusion. He wants to taste what it's like to drive a car, and the illusion is the closest thing that will facilitate it. So why are we in this realm that we're in? Because we have a desire, or we have desires that reality does not accommodate. Okay? So therefore, we're ignoring reality. We're turning away from Krishna, and we're entering into the realm of illusion, wherein we embrace ignorance so that we can taste the illusion. Just like if you went to a movie, as you're watching the screen, there's an image projected on the screen. It's not reality. It's light on a screen. You feel like you're seeing two people fall in love, and then one of them's dying. You're going up and then you're going down. But there's not a person up there that's falling in love, and there's not a person up there that's dying. There's just light on a screen representing an illusory presentation of that. But we want to enter in and lose ourselves in that illusion. And if someone's sitting next to us in the chair as we're watching the film and keeps saying, "But you do understand these are just actors. But this really isn't real. This is just light on a screen," you're going to be like, "Be quiet. I'm trying to experience this. I want to experience it." And so therefore, due to our desire, now Krishna's like, if you want the illusion, I can give it to you. I'll fulfill your desire. But my wish is that you come back and reconnect with me and accept your position in reality, accept your svadharma, accept your eternal dharma. In relation to me. Please come back. But sometimes we want the illusion so deeply, we're like, I don't want to hear "please come back." Someone comes and gives the Bhagavad Gita, and the message of the Bhagavad Gita is "please come back." And someone's like, "No, I don't want to read this stuff. I'm an illusion. There's some benevolent being that I have an eternal connection with that's more powerful than me, eternally, ontologically. I don't like that reality. I would prefer the illusion that there's no being superior to me. There's no being that I'm independent. I'm free. I want that illusion. If you want that illusion, you can play it out in this world." But Krishna's so kind. He knows we're better off to step out of the illusion and into the spiritual reality. But he also knows that it won't do us so much good to force us. We have to come to that decision on our own. Otherwise, if we come out, we'll always be wanting to go back. You understand? We need to make that decision on our own. So he allows us to make that decision. He gives us that free will. But he also programs the world in such a way where as we pursue those desires, it may get fulfilled to some degree, but then we lose it. And then we pursue another one, and we enjoy it, and then we lose it. And so we go through this ups and downs, the constant changing of this world. Why? So that we can understand maybe this realm is not our real home. Because I'm eternal, and this realm is temporary. I never am quite comfortable here. And it's that feeling of discomfort that speaks deep within us and makes us think, is there an alternative? Where do I find the alternative? And that's when we start to look towards spirituality. So why is the illusion here? Because we asked for it. Because we desired it. That's why it's here. Actually, in that analogy of the banyan tree and the reflection, so it's saying there's a real, true spiritual realm. And then there's a reflection of the spiritual realm, that is the material world. And what does that reflection rest on? Just like a reflection rests on water, it rests on desire. It rests on material desire. If the material desire were to be taken away, that reflection would cease. Just like if you took the water out of the pond, there'd be no more reflection of the tree. If there was no material desire for that reflection to rest on, there would be no material realm. So why is it here? Because we desire it. The moment we stop desiring it, at least for us, we don't see the illusion anymore, we see the reality. Thank you very much. Very, very good questions.
Can I ask a question? Go deeper?
Yes, we'd like to go deeper.
Okay. Okay, I understand that in a personal point of view. Okay, but I understand that it's an internal choice that we make. Okay, to not live in the illusion. But question is, can like the divine or Krishna exist without illusion? So does the illusion has to exist too, so the divine exists? You know where I'm coming from, right?
No, that's an interesting question. And it's something like asking this: do prisons have to exist for the government to exist? The government can exist without the prison, but because the citizens act in a particular way, therefore the government creates the facility of the prison. But they would prefer if there were no criminals. But because people desire to act as criminals, therefore the facility of the prison is created. You understand? Otherwise it's unnecessary. Right? Otherwise it's totally unnecessary. Right? But it's interesting, when we speak about Krishna specifically, let's talk about Krishna. Really understand who he is. When we really take the conception of the absolute truth or the supreme and let's say, I don't know if we say cease to speak in the general terms, but let's say we begin to speak in the more specific terms, not just saying the absolute truth, but saying Krishna. Then we can examine him and his life and who he is. And there's something that's very interesting about Krishna. He has no interest in the illusion of this world. It's said that he never touches this world. He never touches material energy. There's a saying, Krishna never sets one foot out of Vrindavan. Vrindavan is the spiritual realm. The Vrindavan that Krishna exists in eternity is beyond the material realm. It's like if this material realm is a bubble, that realm is beyond it. When Krishna enters into this realm, first that spiritual realm enters into the material realm, and then he enters into the spiritual realm within the material realm. So he never, ever, ever touches the material energy. It's just, he has no interest in it. It's not his realm. For its maintenance, he expands into other forms, like different avatars, or he empowers other beings within this realm, like the devas, for the maintenance of the illusory realm, or the maintenance of the prison house. He never touches it. But the closest thing to Krishna touching this material realm, or you could say when Krishna touches this material realm, do you know how he appears? This is a very subtle thing, very interesting. When Krishna touches the material realm, he's Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is Krishna with a slight transformation. Just like if you take yogurt, what is yogurt? It's just milk. But if this little bacteria is inside the milk, then what is just all milk turns into yogurt. It transforms. Krishna never touches the material energy, but when he does, or if he does, or how he does it as Shiva. And Shiva is essentially Krishna just transformed by a touch of the material energy, and he engages in this energy like that. Right. So he's beyond the material realm. He exists, and the material realm is something that emanates from him effortlessly with a glance. But he takes no, he's above and beyond it. There's a lot in the Bhagavad Gita that speaks about these apparent paradoxes, where Krishna says that everything is in me, but I'm beyond all of it. Like this. Usually when we contact something or when we're involved in something, we become affected by it and transform. Let's say we create a child. A man and a woman create a child with their bodies. That creation they don't remain aloof, but they get tied into it. Even if they were to act aloof, internally they still feel it, right? But generally, they become very tied to that creation. If someone creates a business, they get very tied into that business. Krishna, the entire material world effortlessly emanates from him, and at the same time, he's entirely beyond it. It doesn't affect him the way that it affects someone who's attached to it. Most people are attached to their works. Krishna creates it without work and remains aloof from it. But what he is very attached to is the soul, the spiritual energy. To that, he's very much attached. He gives the soul its freedom, just like a loving parent sometimes has to let a child explore on its own. But he's calling that soul back all the time. And he even accompanies that soul as his expansion is the Paramama in the body of every living being. So that soul he has a deep connection with. The material realm he's not interested in. But the souls that are within it, he's meditating on them and accompanying them all the time. And then we get this beautiful verse in Bhagavad Gita, 6th chapter, where he really starts to explain his own heart. And he says that one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, to them I am never lost. And then he says this, and they are never lost to me. I'm thinking about them all the time. The way that they're thinking about me, I'm thinking about them. I'm deeply attached, deeply connected, not to the material energy, but to the souls that are within it. Is that okay? Thank you. Such great questions tonight. Aoife, is that right? Yes.
Wow, thank you for remembering. When we transcend the material realm and go back to the spiritual realm, are we then still within our own individual soul, or do we connect to a Krishna soul or a conscious soul, or are we still always going to be as the I, but the non-material I?
So, right at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, really the first real instruction that Krishna gives to Arjuna is Natweva ham jatu nasam nadvamne me janadipa nachaivana bhavishyama sarvevyam mataparam. Arjuna, never was there a time, Natweva ham jatu nasam, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor every one of these warriors on the battlefield, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So he's saying, I will always be me, you will always be you. Not necessarily in the same body, but you will always be you. And that's something that never changes. This is the nature of the spiritual energies, that it doesn't change. So it's not that we have our individual existence at one moment and then at another moment that's gone. But if I'm an individual now, I'm always an individual. Now, certain philosophers say that individuality is an imposition, but there's a lot of problems with that argument. But if we read the Bhagavad Gita as it is, Krishna also says, what is it? 15th chapter, text 7. Mamai vangso jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana. Sanatana means eternal. Mamai vangso. Mamai angsa means like a fragment or a part, a separated part of something. Mama means my. Mamai vangso, my fragmental parts, my separated fragmental parts. Mamai vangso jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana. the jivas within this world, the souls within this world they're my fragmental parts, sanatana, eternally. So the Bhagavad Gita speaks really clearly about this. Now, it's a very subtle realm of inquiry to understand what exactly do we look like? How exactly do we operate? What exactly is our form in the spiritual realm? Is it there all the time? Is it sleeping in a test tube waiting for us to wake up? Are we there but thinking that we're here? These are more subtle questions that I don't feel so qualified to answer. But what we can say is that we have an eternal place in that realm. We can say that in some way we've fallen from that realm, but we can say in another sense we've never fallen from that realm. And when the consciousness that is harmonious with that realm arises in us, we transcend the illusion and we wake up in the eternal. Huh? When people ask me that, sometimes I forget what I said just a second ago. But when the spiritual consciousness arises in us, now our consciousness is in harmony with the spiritual realm. Right? Enlightenment means our spiritual consciousness awakens. That's the polar opposite of the material consciousness. The material consciousness is I'm the center, the world revolves around me. The spiritual consciousness, God is the center, we all revolve around God. If we're uncomfortable with that idea, eternally, ontologically, there's someone else that's the center, then we can try to be the center in the virtual world. But if we're comfortable with that idea, and the spiritual consciousness arises in us, then we all revolve harmoniously around that central root of all existence, and that's the spiritual realm. Now, that ontological reality can be off-putting to some. They'll say that you are like a bunch of sheep and you need a shepherd. Sometimes they'll say it like this, right? But the counter-argument could be like, well, look how you're suffering. And you're saying you're independent and powerful. You haven't created anything. It's all been created for you. And you're wandering around in an illusion that you're independent, when really everything is being provided for you at every moment. We're almost like these kids that say, I don't need my parents, but everything, the clothes that we're wearing, everything that we have is provided by them. Right? So only in our illusion are we not dependent on them. And so that's what the Bhakti Yogis are saying. That's our existence here. But if our awareness, if our consciousness not only becomes comfortable with that ontological reality, but it embraces it with love, then we very happily revolve around that. And this is the crazy, far out esoteric thing, is that being that's in the center becomes controlled by the love of all of those that are revolving around him. Or even that being in the center is fascinated by the experience of those that are revolving around him and wishes to play that role as well. And he does so by becoming his own devotee and revolving around. So it's not a second-class citizen, an eternal second-class citizen. It's the most desirable existence. But the mind has to really understand it. We have to open up we could really say the heart has to really understand it. The heart has to become open to that. And if the heart opens up, we can transcend. Thank you. These are great questions tonight. I'm really impressed with everyone. Although we're willing to entertain any level of question here. So don't feel like you have to have a super deep philosophical question. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So I just want to know that why in Hinduism we have so many gods and so many deities and so many stories like Ramayana and then origin of Shiva Mahabharata. Uh, what is the reason that we have so many gods? That's just my question.
It can be difficult to figure out, right? There's so many texts. All the Vedas, and the Vedas speak about the different devas: Agni, Indra, Vishnu, etc. And then you have the Puranas. And the Puranas have so many gods and goddesses and so many stories. And then, of course, there's Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita. How to make sense of it all? It seems to be so broad. And it seems like if I'm reading this book, it seems like Devi is the supreme. And if I read this book, Vishnu is the supreme. And if I read this book, Krishna is the supreme. How do I make sense of it all? And different yogis or different philosophers have looked at it all and given different explanations. But what I found in my journey is that within the Bhakti tradition, it gives really strong, convincing, consistent analysis of all of these texts. And it shows if you draw from them all and put them all together, it paints a picture. Okay? And so that, but before we speak of that picture, this is what causes the confusion. And it'll be interesting to me how you receive. I'm assuming you were born and raised in India. In my experience, it's a generalization, but there's a lot of truth to it. That the Western world and the Eastern world, they think differently and they teach differently. And perhaps we could either say it's reflected in their religious texts, or we might say it grows out of their religious texts, which my guess is probably more truth on that end. That the way we think grows out of our religious texts. Now, the Western mentality grows out of the Abrahamic texts, the Bible, the Torah, which I guess is the Old Testament of the Bible, and the other Jewish texts, and the Quran. And the Eastern mentality grows out of the Vedic literature, the broader Vedic literature. Now, what's the difference between the two? In the Western literature, you have one life. In the Eastern literature, you're eternal. And you have many, many chances to achieve your salvation, let's say. Right? Or, well, another point. The Western literature is especially concerned with salvation. How will I become free of my sin and find my eternal place in heaven? The Eastern literature is less concerned exactly with salvation. It's more concerned, we could say, with enlightenment, right? It's more concerned, not exactly like, I need to be free of my sin and I want to be in this place. It's more like, how can I see the reality and understand who I am fully? Like that. Different idea. Not that there's no overlap, but it's a different approach. In the Eastern traditions, there's one God, clearly. And there's a line drawn in the sand. And the message is, if you're on the wrong side of the line, the line is, do you have faith in that God? If you're on the right side of that line, you are saved. If you're on the wrong side, it doesn't matter how well you've lived, you go to hell forever. Okay. On the East, and there's messages like, God is a jealous God. If you don't worship him, you will be condemned. If you worship anyone else, that is the worst thing you can do. Yeah. It's the absolute worst. You're condemned to hell forever. Goodbye. In the Eastern text, you have the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that people of this world that are interested in materialistic people in this world, they worship the various devas, the various gods and goddesses, to receive the things of this world. But Krishna says, but the fact is they're doing it with incomplete knowledge. Because they don't realize, and he says they do it avidi purvakam. It's done without full understanding. He says they don't understand that everything that those gods give them is actually given by me through these gods. They don't realize that I'm behind it all along. But he says, then he says this, but if that's their faith, I'm in the heart of every living being, and I'll strengthen that faith in them. I'll strengthen the faith that they have to worship this other god or goddess. Right? So it's not like he's jealous, because he's saying, actually, that's a step up. Now they're regularly manifesting a sense of, first, that there's a power, that there's a being more, that there's higher powers than themselves. That's a step up. Second, they're showing gratitude. That's a step up. They're evolving by worshiping this other god or goddess. Krishna is saying that's a good thing. Not only am I not jealous, I'm glad that they're taking a step up, and within their own heart, I'll increase that faith in them. So therefore, when we pick up the Devi Bhagavat, it sounds like Devi's number one. If we read the Shiva Purana, it sounds like Shiva's number one. But if you read the Bhagavad Gita, it's going to analyze all of this and be explicit. Krishna's there going to say, I've been encouraging them to worship this way, but really it's all coming from me. Right? So it all gets clarified there, but it's a different, because it's such a different way of thinking. It's not going to come out and say, hi, I'm Krishna, I am the God, worship me or go to hell forever. You've got one lifetime to do it. Hurry up. It's a much more nuanced approach, and it can be confusing, and it can be so confusing that the compiler of the Vedic texts began to regret how he presented them, right? Because he was drawing from an eternal body of knowledge, but then he was categorizing it himself. And he realized that he began to feel, he writes about this himself. And he says that I was feeling despondent. I was feeling incomplete. I was feeling like something's not quite right. And then he intuited, and then he had his intuition confirmed by his guru, Narada, that he hadn't been clear enough, that divine love for Sri Krishna, this Bhagavat Dharma, is the culmination of all of these paths and all of this worship and all this. It's meant to lead to there. The worshiping of the god or the goddess is meant to bring one a step up so that you continue up the ladder of evolution to exclusive. When I say exclusive, I mean you understand that this being is all coming, and that through love of this being, I satisfy every being. I connect with every being. Like when you water the root, every leaf is satisfied. When your love goes to that original being, your love goes to every being. And that can't be said for any of the other gods or goddesses. It's not the same. Those are like leaves on the tree. So realizing that people were going to interpret his works and misunderstand them and have difficulty, just as you're questioning right now, he wrote another text to clarify everything. And that text is called the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavat Purana. Bhagavat Purana, Srimad Bhagavatam. This is his most beautiful, most powerful, most systematic, most incredibly monumental masterpiece. Srila Vyasadeva, the sage who compiled all the Vedic literature. So he tells his own story at the beginning of it, explaining what this text is. This is the text where I no longer make false promises about how you can be happy through material success, even Vedic material success. And there's no longer going to be any promises that, like you find in the Upanishads, that you'll find complete satisfaction through renunciation and moksha. I kick all that out of this text, and I make it very clear that divine love is the goal, the highest goal, the supreme goal. He says that this book that I'm sharing with you now is the cream of all the Vedas. If you churn it and churn it and churn it, you get to divine love. He says, this is my work in my maturity. Of all my different texts, those are not, you weren't getting the full message. In this text, you're going to get the full message, like this. And then he becomes super explicit throughout it. And then the 10th canto of that work is 90 chapters, all about Krishna's life, so that you can really understand who he is. And then you see each deva, Indra misunderstands Krishna, becomes embarrassed. In the Vedas, he's seen as as practically flawless. But in the Bhagavad Purana, he makes a mistake, misunderstands who Krishna is, surrenders to Krishna. Brahma, the creator of the universe, does the same thing, right? So many instances like this we find in Srimad Bhagavatam. So it becomes, if we want to know the answer, if we want to know the key, people debate about the meaning of them for ages and for centuries. But if we want to understand them and interpret them correctly, then the best way to go is to hear from the author himself. And in this case, we actually have the author answering the question himself. He does it very intentionally and very explicitly in the text called Bhagavad Purana or Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay. Thank you. These are every question tonight. It's so good. You have time for maybe one more question. Would anyone like to ask one? Is that a hesitation? You have a yes, but you're welcome to ask another. Would you like to? No? Okay. Thank you.
Mine would be a follow-up from that.
Okay. Follow-ups are great.
So thank you. So following up from that question, could possibly like Krishna and Brahman and Shiva be interchangeable? For example, in the same way that in Shivaism they would say Shiva and Shakti, and Shiva is the absolute creator, and many realized masters say that the Brahman is the absolute creator or the essence of all things, and then Krishna is saying he's the essence of all things. So if those other traditions didn't know about Krishna, are they technically, could they be interchangeable as the same source essence?
Well, to say could they, I mean, the question isn't could something be? You know, could it be that we're not in India right now and we're in Europe? Could, the question is, what is it, right? What is it? You see, that's the question. So again, the reality is that how we perceive things is closely connected with our own desires, right? If I have trouble accommodating the idea that there's a being that's ontologically superior to me, then the teachings of one facet of the Supreme are going to be most appealing to me, and that the absolute truth of the Supreme is non-personal. Because and that's a real facet of the Supreme. It's real. But if I'm uncomfortable with the idea that there's a being that I'm eternally dependent on, then I can become more comfortable with that oneness. And as I read these texts, I will say that the texts that speak to that most are the most important texts, right? And if I believe that the goal of life is to, and if I'm attached to enjoying the material realm, then the Vedas will seem most important texts, which are saying, here's the best way to live life. Honor the devas and the devis. Make offerings of sacrifice to them. Cultivate good karma and receive boons for that. This is the best thing. And I'll say those texts are the most important texts. But the question is, how did the author himself tell us to understand the texts? The idea is that this is a body of knowledge that's eternal. It's a body of knowledge that's apurusheya, that's beyond human creation, but it's provided by the sage Vyasadeva very intentionally, and he shares. I share this sometimes, that there's this film called Annie Hall. You know that? Have you seen this film before? It's a film by Woody Allen, where he's like a neurotic New Yorker, and he's waiting in line to watch like an avant-garde film with his girlfriend, and behind him in line is some intellectual person with his girlfriend, and they're discussing the director and the writer of the film, and he's speaking to his artistic vision and how he understands it. And as Woody Allen is overhearing this person's interpretation of this director's work, he's becoming very frustrated. And his girlfriend turns to him saying, "Why are you becoming so upset?" And he said, "Because this person doesn't understand this director at all. He's completely misinterpreting it. And she's saying, okay, well, that's no big deal. Calm down. But as the person goes on, he's becoming more and more frustrated. And eventually he can't take it anymore. And he turns around and speaks to the person and says, I'm sorry, sir, but you have absolutely no idea how to interpret this director's works. You got it all wrong. And then that person turns to him and says, well, I'll have you know that I'm a professor, of a cinematographer or whatever, like at Columbia University, and my PhD is on the works of this director. So I think I know very well exactly what his intention was and what his message was in his works. And then Woody Allen gets more upset, and then he says, wait, just wait right here. And then he steps outside of the frame of the camera, and he comes back, and he says, here's the director himself. And then the director turns to the other guy and says, you have no idea what you're talking about. You've entirely misinterpreted my works like this. Right? And then Woody Allen turns to the screen and says, if only life could be like this. The point being, if we want to know, we can debate forever on the meaning of this. And we can throw out ideas like, can it all be true? But that's never how Vedanta has been understood, that it's all true. It's not some kind of different knowledge that's somehow different, that we can just interpret it any way that we want and say one interpretation is as good as the other. As a matter of fact, historically, great thinkers have very carefully written commentaries on it, defending different positions with giving it great thought and great insight. So personally, I feel that just say that any way that you look at it is okay. It's kind of like stepping into a university where there's courses given by professors on, let's say on biology, and saying, yeah, but we can interpret it any way that we want. You're just throwing out all of the real research that people have really done to really understand it. And so the best way to find out how to interpret this work is to hear from the person that compiled it, and that's Vyas, and he very intentionally explains it. That being said, it doesn't mean that everyone will be receptive to that, but the tradition is so flexible that one can approach it from where they're at, and if they approach it with sincerity, they'll evolve like that. Is that all right? Yeah. Okay. All right. It's been a wonderful evening here. Every single question I thought was really was a really worthy question, and I felt it was a wonderful discussion. Thank you all so much. As I say every night, if you would like to hear the past Q&As or the future ones, they're being shared online and other courses. Simply speak to Gabriella here, and she'll connect you with that. 8 a.m. most mornings, Yogi Charu is teaching yoga asana and meditation to rave reviews. People are really loving these classes. That's 8 till 9. From 9 till 10, I'm teaching more like this philosophy and bhakti and yoga philosophy. Wonderful kirtan, wonderful kirtan, wonderful prasadam, wonderful people. Please enjoy yourself. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you all so very much. Hari Om Tat Sat.